All right, all right. Happy Sunday, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. If you're new, I do want to let you know we're also streaming on X and Rumble, and of course, last but not least, on YouTube as well. Okay, ladies and gents. I did not expect this to happen. It's an interesting weekend. Interesting weekend. Tonight's theme is There's No Mystery. None at all. We'll get into all of these stories, ladies and gents. We are going to start off with our special guest. So first and foremost, I do want to go ahead and show you that thumbnail so you can see what we are discussing tonight. Again, like I told you, it has been a crazy weekend, ladies and gents. Tonight, we are discussing Iran wrecks U.S. Navy fleet. Yes, they are back to fighting again, ladies and gents. The U.S. heavily attacked Iran over the weekend, and Iran has responded. We'll get into that discussion with our special guest, Dennis Kucinich, who has had a lot to say about these wars over the years. We're also going to discuss, if you have not heard by now, Lindsey Graham has died. He is gone. He is gone. We will talk about the legacy that Lindsey Graham has left upon us, as well as to what happened leading up to his death as well. Didn't expect that one. We're also going to be making the connection to the recent report that came about Mitch McConnell. The Senate seems to be opening up some seats, ladies and gents. That's what it seems like here. We're also going to discuss, I've been waiting to get into the story, part one of Prince Warned Us. We're going to get into what happened to the artist Prince and how this can be a lesson for other musicians getting into the industry. So I've been waiting to talk about this. We're going to get into part one. We're also going to discuss, we have a new update about Nolan Wells. His family is speaking out, and it is not good, ladies and gents, the information that is being revealed now. And last but not least, we're going to discuss, it appears that Trump's housing bill is now codified into law because Donald Trump didn't sign that bill. We're going to get into all of this, ladies and gents. Like I said, there's a lot to discuss. Let's go ahead and bring in our special guest. It's been a minute, but he has been here before. Our special guest tonight is a former congressman and also the former mayor of Cleveland. Let's bring back in Dennis Kucinich. Dennis, hi.
Hey, Sabby, how are you?
I'm great. It's so great to see you again. It's been a minute.
It has been. It's good to join you now.
All right. So you wrote an article recently. I want to talk about this before we get into the recent updates about Iran. You have been sounding the alarm about this for quite some time. It's called War Crimes, War Powers, and American Sovereignty. The USA plus Israel equals the Department of Forever War. Dennis, can you please explain to everyone why this is so important and why this is something we need to push back on, this so-called, I guess, merger here with like Israel and Israel's military?
Yeah, there is a provision, Sabby, in the National Defense Authorization Act of 2027, which isn't in and of itself is a nightmare because it increases military spending to $1.5 trillion from $900 billion previously in 2026. And that's a 66 2/3% increase. Forget domestic priorities. We're moving into just an armed camp state. But there's a provision in this bill for 2027 that merges the United States military and the Israeli military at the top level. Now, how does it do that? What it does, it takes every single sophisticated area for warfare fighting, artificial intelligence, autonomous vehicles, drone warfare, biotechnology, on and on and on. And it integrates the US and the Israeli potentials. It eliminates duplication, just like a merger, okay? And it's at the cost of our national sovereignty. It will drag us into forever wars. That's the article that you showed, posted in Substack. And it's inexplicable that something like this could even be proposed. Because you think about it, if a country's involved in a war and it's defeated, well, the other country inevitably takes it over. Here we have Israel just merging without firing a shot. It's like an internal subterfuge that has occurred. It's unconstitutional, but what's a constitution between friends? And it's also a nightmare when you consider that Israel is getting $4 billion a year for its defense offense in this budget. But they're going for the whole 1.5 trillion, have influence over that. And this proposal, by the way, actually doesn't originate in Congress, originated in Tel Aviv with Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yeah. Dennis, we've been warning people about this. Thomas Massey has spoken out against this. Ro Khanna has spoken out against this. It's incredibly important that something like this does not happen. I'm curious, when you were in Congress, do you remember seeing this much support for Israel during that time as we're seeing right now?
Well, no, but has there been support for Israel? Yes. Some of it comes as a result of the financial influence of groups like AIPAC, no question about that. Others, there is a religious connection. People, and I'm not talking about other people who happen to be Jewish. I'm talking about Christians who feel very closely tied, depending on their eschatology, to Israel. And we now have the convergence of that plus the money, and at a time when Israel has coaxed the U.S. to go into another war, as they did with Iraq and Libya. So the influence today is such that if you walk around the Congress, and I in Washington every once in a while now, and you see one office after another with a Israeli flag outside of it, and the words underneath that saying, "We stand," or "I stand with Israel." Look, you can be for Israel, but if you're a member of the United States Congress, you take an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States. Your first obligation, above everything else, is to the United States of America and its people. And that's the principle that's different today, Sabby, because some of the members of Congress are forgetting their constitutional oath.
Yeah, they've definitely put Israel first. That leads me into what's happening right now. This war with Iran, which continues to escalate. Some are believing that it's going to go at least through the midterms because of the way Donald Trump is behaving. There was a pause for a little bit. They've been trading strikes again. And then just recently, it was announced again over the weekend that the U.S. decided to strike Iran.
Right now, at this moment, we're going to turn now to a Fox News alert. U.S. Central Command just announced they began a third round of strikes against Iran in response to Iranian forces attacking a Cyprus-flagged container ship in the Strait of Hormuz. CENTCOM says the U.S. is degrading Iran's ability to attack ships, and the strikes are being carried out at the direction of the commander-in-chief. Tom, that's right.
So I just want to let everybody know, basically, Iran made it very clear that if those commercial ships that go through the Strait of Hormuz do not follow the approved route, that they will be fired upon. So we've seen this back and forth with Iran and the U.S., but now it was announced that Iran has closed the Strait of Hormuz again. And so when we talk about like these geopolitical issues and how it affects us here back home as well, we got to remember like the gas prices are going to increase again, guys. Like the price of oil is going to surge again. Like, so the U.S. implementing, first of all, starting this war with Iran, Dennis, I want to get your take about that. Why do you feel Donald Trump did this, but the other presidents before him did not try to start a war with Iran?
No question he was coaxed into it by Benjamin Netanyahu. This wasn't about United States interests. It was never in the interest of the United States to attack Iran. And Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon. They're not building a nuclear weapon. That was a canard that was used to go after Iran. And frankly, Netanyahu did the same thing in 2002 when he testified in front of a committee that I was on, and I spoke to him. And, he was raising this nuclear specter then about Iraq. And I asked him at the hearing, who else would you attack? He said, Libya and Iran. This is a long-term plan. And so here you have Netanyahu, who's in trouble politically. He needs to keep wars going to strengthen his position. And so the idea of a peace between the United States and Iran, that Iran wanted to stop the attacks on South Lebanon, Netanyahu wasn't going to go along with that ever. So this memorandum of understanding that was negotiated as a means to end the war, he actually had a veto power over it by continuing to bomb and to kill the people in South Lebanon. So this has been about Israel right from the start. It has not been about the United States of America. This reflects back on the concerns that I have about merging the militaries of the U.S. and Israel, because then we're going to be pulled into one war after another. We should not be at war against Iran, and the impact on our economy is going to have an effect that's going to go way beyond the election. This is raising the cost of living for Americans inevitably. It's not just the cost of transportation, but those extra costs that are tacked onto other goods. It doesn't make any sense at all, and except that there's this commitment to Israel, and that causes us to be entangled into their Middle East ethnic cleansing, genocide, wars.
A lot of it's connected to the money. This is what I've been trying to make people understand: the billionaire, the trillionaire class, the donor class interest. It supports the Greater Israel Project, right? So it's like, this is why I continue to tell people Israel could not operate the way that it does if the donor class didn't support it. So you always got to connect it back to the money. I want to show people, because Iran did respond to those attacks from the U.S. It says here, a shout out to Arya. Iran, again, they fully closed the Strait of Hormuz. It struck 2 vessels that ignored warnings and turned off the radio signal. So I want to show you guys one of the images here. As you can see that HIMARS launched from Bahrain towards Iran, explosion at Dyer Port in Bushehr. So you guys can see here. These are some of the images that are coming through. Just one of the many there. And again, like, Iran has control over that Strait of Hormuz. There's nothing the U.S. can really do about that. And Drop Site News, they said that Iran's IRGC claimed it struck the U.S. operated Prince Hassan Air Base in Jordan with several ballistic missiles, destroying a command and control center and hangars that were housing those MQ-9 drones, which we've talked about before on this show. And they've also reported images here that you guys can see as well. There's one of them there. Another one there. These are all like coming through. Ladies and gents, I'm just showing them to you. Here's another one here. And you'll also see here, this is the big one. Iran hit the U.S. Navy fleet, the 5th Fleet headquarters in Manama, Bahrain. We can see the smoke rising. So we see once again, Dennis, U.S. troops in danger.
So go ahead.
Yeah, this is a U.S. Navy fleet. And Dennis, they were already talking about the Trump administration sending more U.S. troops there. And it's just, again, it's a death mission for them. I want to get your take on this.
Well, I'm totally opposed to the United States being involved in any kind of war against Iran. When I was in Congress, Sabby, I gave over 100 presentations in the House of Representatives as to reasons why we should not go to war against Iran, because George Bush was talking about that. Some of these same discussions occurred 20 years ago and more. And there's no reason why the U.S. should be doing this, except it's being dragged along by those interests that you identified. And right now, there are Israeli officials who are opining about attacking Turkey. So this is right in time for us to merge our military so that we get drawn into a war against Turkey. Now, the United States has to stand sovereign and independent. We have no permanent enemies, no permanent friends. We have permanent interests, and we must guide our country according to what our national interest is. It's not in these wars. And we put, as you just pointed out, the men and women who proudly serve America, and rightly so, we put their lives at risk for what? We know that Iran has the ability to counterstrike our troops that are in that area, our Navy personnel that are in that area. Why are we engaging in something that puts our troops at risk when America doesn't have any fundamental national security interest here? Iran is not a threat to the United States of America. Iran did not intend to attack any American installations, absent Israel's involvement here. Iran doesn't have the potential to come after America, the capability. And it doesn't have the weapons of mass destruction. We've had the same argument about Iraq. So we have to take a new national security direction, not peace through strength, but strength through peace. We must begin to build down these weapon systems and to begin to eliminate them, especially the nuclear ones. We have to build back and these military bases that are as an archipelago all over the world. We have 800 bases and more around the world. That's costing taxpayers a lot of money when we have needs here at home. We have to start taking care of things here at home. And today we're right at the point of 80% of our domestic spending goes for war. 80%, Sabby. We're forgetting healthcare, education, feeding people, and our country prefers war. Well, with that kind of an approach, we will not be able to sustain the United States of America. And my first concern, frankly, I'm a citizen of the world in many ways, but I'm an American. I want to protect this country. I want to take care of our people, and I want to get out of these wars that we're being dragged into.
Dennis, let me ask you a question. You mentioned George Bush. So George Bush was also entertaining this at some point, at going to war with Iran?
Absolutely. Yeah, there was, and he was being pushed in that direction. But I think the events in Iraq superseded the ability of the United States to take on an additional war at that time. But, I saw this coming. They were talking about dropping nuclear bombs on Iran 20 years ago. And I pointed out that to do that would also, not only create a massive crime against the people in Iran, but that the radioactivity would drift and affect many other nations as well. War is theoretical for people in Washington. It's not theoretical for people in Gaza, the West Bank, for people in Lebanon, in Yemen, and on and on. It's not theoretical. And the United States of America, which at one time was admired around the world for its ability to stand up for freedom, we're losing our freedoms here at home. And we have to remember that. Israel has been involved in training ICE leaders, personnel. So that kind of an ethic will come home if the militaries are combined. The drones will come to our cities. Forget flock cameras. I mean, that's just the opening of an infrastructure of invasion of our Fourth Amendment rights. And so we're talking about, we're at an inflection point here in American history where if we have this merger take place with Israel's army at the top technological levels, we are risking our own independence, our own sovereignty, and our own freedoms, frankly.
Everybody hear what Dennis just said about the drones coming home? This is what I was talking about. There's nothing more crazier that can happen to us than this. It's very scary. This idea of nuclear weapons against Iran, it's crazy, hearing this now. They were even talking about using nuclear weapons back then, to your point. Do you believe that Donald Trump may try to use a nuclear weapon against Iran?
one of the problems with the Trump presidency is you can't predict anything that he's going to do. He's very impulsive. He's given to last minute interventions by people who have his ear. He's not rational. And I'd say anything's possible. He remember, it was only a few months ago that he made a public statement that, essentially equated to destroying Iran as a nation, 90 million people. Now, what kind of thinking goes into making that statement, if any thinking goes into it at all? So, yeah, and that's why Congress is essential here. And Congress has been very weak. Congress even passed resolutions, war powers resolutions that would restrain the president's power. He doesn't pay any attention to them at all. Ultimately, Congress's ultimate power is the power of the purse. You want to stop this war? Cut off funds. Stop the funds. You stop the funds, the war stops in its tracks. And if the United States stops attacking Iran, Iran's not going to attack the United States. That's pretty clear. But Iran is not going to sit there and be a keepy doll like in a carnival ready to be knocked down by the United States. They're fighting back for their country, for their what they call their sacred defense. And frankly, Sabby, I mean, speaking for myself, but I can imagine how you felt too. You think of February 28th. We killed their religious and political leader, the Ayatollah, and his family, and also killed 168 little girls and school children in Manab. That's a stain. That is a permanent stain on our country's history. There hasn't even been so much as an apology. I can't even imagine that. But when you see that kind of brutality that's expressed there, the brutality that's expressed in Gaza and the West Bank and in South Lebanon, the lack of any consciousness of humanity, the Nazi-like performance of IDF soldiers who paradoxically are doing the same thing to Palestinians and to other Arabs that the Nazis did to the Jews. I mean, how in the world can never again mean here we go again? And so I feel very strongly that we need to take a stand against more war. We need to cut back this budget that's guaranteed to finance wars. It gives Israel a chance for low-cost wars at our dime. We must stop this merger of the military to protect our sovereignty, our own independence. We have to reestablish what it means to be an American. This is, I grew up and I believe in this country. I love this country. And I have served this country, but I will tell you that right now we're in a maximum danger. And we need to, people need to be calling their congressman this week, because this bill is probably going to come up before the House, the NDAA Section 219, and tell your member of Congress, not ask, tell them they must vote against having that in the bill, have it removed. And if it isn't removed, they have to vote against the bill. And sooner or later, Congress will realize if the bill keeps going down, that they have to get rid of that amendment or that section so that there is no merger.
Let me tell you about this. I'm not sure if you heard about it, but Ro Khanna was just detained in the West Bank. He's been talking about this recently. I covered it yesterday. Ro Khanna was visiting the West Bank along with other, I think this gentleman in Cam as well. And he was detained not by the IDF, but by Israeli settlers in the West Bank. When the IDF did arrive, according to Ro Khanna, the IDF, of course, took the Israeli settlers' side. So again, this is a congressman. Ro Khanna said that the Israeli settlers were laughing. He said the arrogance and the smugness that they had, and not even caring that he was a Congress member or anything like that. Ro Khanna was on Meet the Press Sunday morning, and so was Benjamin Netanyahu. And Benjamin Netanyahu was questioned about what just happened to Ro Khanna. And this response here is unbelievable. You guys got to listen to this.
Before I let you go, I do want to give you the opportunity, if you would like to respond to Congressman Ro Khanna. He is going to be on this broadcast. He says he visited the West Bank. He was blocked by settlers wielding guns. He says the IDF did not help defuse this situation. Do you have any comment on that this morning, Mr. Prime Minister?
Yeah, we're a country of laws, and people who break the law, we take them to court. In the West Bank, in Judea and Samaria, we've had thousands of attempted attacks and warnings against terrorist activities, against innocent Israelis, families, mother with their children driving along the road. They're stopped by terrorists and they kill them. And this has happened again and again and again. There is a vigilante effort, not by the settler community. They're 99.9%, law-abiding citizens. They work, they serve in the army, and so on. There are 150 juvenile delinquents that are not part of that community. They come from the other parts of Israel. I don't want vigilantes of any kind, and we are working to put them under the law. But I think if we put things in perspective, we should see that we have thousands of attacks and some few, but obvious breaking of the law. Then we apply the full measure of the law against them. Israel, unlike our neighbors, is a democracy and a country of law, and we act against those who break the law.
So, Dennis, those settlers have been doing this for years. This is not a new thing. I've never seen them held accountable. I don't even think Netanyahu should have even been on Meet the Press, to be honest with you. It's absolutely disgusting to me that they brought this war criminal on and treated him as kindly as they did. But I want to get your take on this. The fact that, of course, he's lying as usual. But the fact that, again, we are giving them money, we are giving them weapons, and this is how they treat a Congress member.
Well, I'm glad that Congressman Ro Khanna is safe. But I think that anybody who's not part of the IDF or of the settler community could be at risk in the West Bank, in Gaza, South Lebanon. Benjamin Netanyahu is a very skillful prevaricator. He and you have to remember the concept of Hasbara, which is basically you say whatever you want, whether it's true or not. And he does that. Now he is under indictment by the ICC, and the U.S. of course doesn't recognize that, but he is under indictment for war crimes. I think we have to keep in mind that anything that he says isn't just taken with a grain of salt, but is taken and totally rejected because there is a genocide going on. That is a fact. Hundreds of thousands of people who happen to be Palestinians from Gaza, West Bank, and of course, Lebanese now in South Lebanon are being murdered because they're not part of this program that Netanyahu and his ministers are promoting of Greater Israel. It's heartbreaking. I'm glad that Congressman Khanna is safe, but it may not have been safe to go there, frankly. And I get up every day. I think about this, about what's happening to the people there, about their families, about children that are getting shot in the head or in the chest as part of this plan that, well, we'll kill them now so they can't kill us later. What? I mean, where's the humanity? It's like humanity doesn't exist anymore in that kind of thinking. And so I think that we need to take a series of steps. Stop the merger, build down all of this money that's going for war, and start really showing what it means to have peace in America. Each American family, if they were given part of that war budget, would find themselves in relative prosperity. We're undermining what it means to be a republic or democracy by continual attention on war and watching people get killed using our tax dollars. So we become complicit in this if we don't raise our voice objecting to it. And every member of Congress who has a vote needs to keep that in mind. This is much more serious than it was, even a few years ago when I was in the Congress, except let us remember that Benjamin Netanyahu appeared before the United States Congress in September of 2002 when Congress was considering the Iraq War resolution and coaxed Congress at that time to go ahead because Iraq represented such a threat. All baloney. Over 1 million innocent Iraqis perished in that war based on lies that Netanyahu helped to propagate.
Dennis, one more for you. There have been calls by people on the left and the right and in between to get someone like a Thomas Massey, or people have been calling for a Massey Ro Khanna ticket for 2028 to get them to run outside of the duopoly. What is your take on that? I know that, you were a Democrat in Congress. I know that you also had an independent run before. Do you think that, considering everything that's going on now, do you think that someone who does have like the name recognition, if they were to run as an independent in 2028, do you think they stand a chance, or do you think that they're going to run into some of the same issues as before?
Well, there's no question that political parties have enormous influence because of the money they have. And recently they were given a green light to have even more money and unlimited money to be able to get money from everywhere to spend, to exclude the possibility of a third force, third party, an independent run. However, I think the people of America are not happy with Democrats or Republicans as organizations, and they realize that this two-party system hasn't delivered for us, that the quality of life in so much of our country is going this way, that the wealth is getting accelerated to the top, and that there's a massive unfairness about the economy, and that young people are worried about their future, the ability to have a home, to have an education, to pay for their education, have health care, and that's a consistent concern through the population. So is there a chance that an independent could emerge as a viable force? Of course there is. Maybe more so now than since the days of Ross Perot. And Tom Massey has certainly demonstrated his willingness to challenge the party. He's paid for it, but I think he's earned the respect of a lot of Americans because he's done that. And so we'll see what happens. Is the opening there? Yes, absolutely. Could an independent be elected president of the United States? Yes, of course. But that's going to be up to the American people, who will be ready to look at this condition that we have with two parties that are often served just by one money master.
Dennis Kucinich, thank you so much. And where can people follow your work, Dennis?
Substack. I've got a column there. My wife and I often write together, and she is an expert on regenerative agriculture. It's very interesting to read what she writes as well. But you go to Substack, Dennis Kucinich or Elizabeth Kucinich, and you'll be able to see what we write. And I'm going to be posting something again soon because of what's going on again this coming week. Sabby, thank you for being on top of these critical issues, and good luck to you in your endless quest for social and economic justice. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dennis. Talk to you later. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Dennis Kucinich. Again, somebody you should definitely read Dennis's Substack. He talks a lot on his Substack about pushing back against the wars, and he's been warning people about this for years, right? So sometimes it's good to hear from people that were there. Like Dennis was a Congress member. He was under the Clinton administration. He was under the Bush administration. So he's able to tell you how far back a lot of this goes. And I think it's important to listen and to hear what he has to say. All right, ladies and gents, we're going to move on with other stories, of course. Again, tonight's theme is There's No Mystery. There's no mystery. Let's go ahead and give a shout out to Sabby patrons. Thank you guys so much for your support. Really do appreciate you, ladies and gents. Yeah. If you are interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories for you. We have the ultimate, the Sabinators. Don't forget about the Sabsters. They're cool too. We also have Sabbies who are not too shabby. That's what they tell me. That's what they let me know. And last but not least, we have members. All of their names are listed here, ladies and gents, and you can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker. Thank you guys so much. All right, ladies and gents, we have more to get into. Like I said, it's a crazy weekend. Holy shit. I had to do the Ro Khanna story yesterday because I was just like, this is just crazy. You know, otherwise I would have had like 7 stories for today. But let's go ahead and give a shout out to some of the super chats here, and then we'll dive into the next story. Thank you, Measured Man. God don't like ugly, and he don't care too much for pretty. The warmongers, he fire with Mitch. IMO. Thank you, Sparky. If McConnell is gone, will the Kentucky governor or legislature appoint Massey in his place or appoint an AIPAC stooge? If a stooge is appointed, will Massey run against the stooge in November? These are all good questions. Thank you, Trash Panda. Thank you for being a member for 10 months. Prayers for the male escorts who find themselves unemployed due to Lindsey's passing. You guys are hilarious today. Thank you, Kevin. Kucinich from bygone era of real peace Democrats. George McGovern, Cynthia McKinney, Mike Gravel, Wayne Morse of Oregon. Thank you, Roger. Does Bibi understand that if Iran is nuked, Israel won't be able to move in? It'll take 250 years before the radioactivity will fully break down. That's a good point, Roger. I don't think he really cares, to be honest with you. You know, he's kind of crazy up all over the place. I don't think he really cares. All right, ladies and gents, if you haven't done so, do me a solid and smash that like button. And if you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share just like a Care Bear. Let's keep it moving and grooving to the next story, ladies and gents. A while back, we talked about the housing bill that was bipartisan in Congress that was basically just waiting on Donald Trump's signature. Well, Donald Trump pushed back against it after saying that he would sign it, and he pushed back against it because he said that he's not going to sign it without passing of the Save America Act. The Save America Act, which one of those things really pushes back on the way the voting process works. He's calling for voter ID. Did not have enough votes in Congress. So Republicans pushed back against him and told him, you don't have the votes for that. Just sign the housing bill. He decided not to sign the housing bill. But because he didn't sign it, apparently it's ingrained into law anyway. Let's go ahead and get into this. And ladies and gentlemen, this is a missed opportunity for the Trump administration. President, that Donald Trump really could have taken some credit for this here. And people could have been applauding him, those who still have some type of faith left in him, I guess. But he decided not to do that. So here we are now.
Trump's refusal to sign it into law in protest. Trump withholding a signature over his demand for the Senate to pass a controversial voter ID bill. One Democratic lawmaker says Trump's decision could hurt his own party.
He does not care about Republican members of the House and Senate, how it reflects upon them when costs are up and people can't afford health care. People are shopping gas stations. He doesn't give a damn about that. And his own Republican members know it and will suffer for it.
Yep.
Let's bring in former communications director for Representative Hakeem Jeffries, Michael Hardaway, and former Trump State Department appointee and MS Now political analyst, Matthew Bartlett. Good to see you guys as always. Let's get into this here, Matthew. The president said straight up he won't sign the housing bill, but didn't end up vetoing it either. Can he still take credit for it? I mean, why is he being so stubborn and hanging on to the SAVE Act when it clearly doesn't have the votes right now?
Yeah, Alex, what a mess. As you said, this Congress is really not doing a lot on the priority issues that Americans feel, namely on affordability, cost of living. And one of the biggest issues is housing. So finally, both parties in the House and the Senate move. And what happens? The president refuses to sign it. It will become law. Listen, candidly, I'm not sure it will have a large effect on the massive structural issues that we have, not just in the economy, but certainly related to housing. But the notion of caring, of doing something that the president has just now jettisoned and just shown a stubborn, callous approach making statements about how he doesn't care. It's a big yawn. Again, it shows a lack of understanding, a sympathy for Americans, and instead this insistence on the SAVE Act, a horrible piece of legislation that he's not trying to get more Democrats on. He's aiming the cannon inside the GOP tent and going after his own party. So again, a true mess here.
So
let me pause here and let me interject for just a second. So what people have to understand is that Donald Trump is serving the billionaire and now trillionaire class. That's who he's operating for. Same thing with the way that he's saying, oh, we're going to have negotiation talks with Iran. Always seems to happen on the weekend. He is manipulating the market, and that benefits the billionaire and the trillionaire class. That benefits his class interests, which he is a part of. So you got to remember, Donald Trump is a billionaire. He's not like the other presidents that we've had where they're like, oh, well, I'm captured by these donors. No, he's part of the same team. That's who he's been benefiting. That's who he's been operating for. And I continue to tell you guys, the amount of wealth that Trump has accumulated since he has been in office this term is astounding. This is absolutely insane. Now, let's get to the housing issue. We talked about housing on the show, I don't know how many times. One thing I recommend everybody to look at is called the Out of Reach report. It is released every July. In fact, I'll be talking about it soon, probably either this week or next week. Every year, this report is released and it tells you how much it costs in your state to afford just a 2-bedroom rental. I've been covering this report for 3 years. Every year, the numbers continue to increase. America is not becoming more affordable. America is becoming more unaffordable. And the one thing that everybody really needs, aside from healthcare, is housing and aside from food, right? So you have kids graduating from college with college degrees, can't afford to even put money aside to get a single family home or even a condo, however you want to put it. They can't afford to put money aside to put down the down payment to get a home. But you have private equity firms that continuously buy up property, renovate it sometimes, increase the price. This is absolutely insane. You have people who have homes, like maybe some of the boomers who have homes, who are holding on to their homes, and rightfully so, because they don't know what's going to happen here, and it's like nowadays it kind of seems like, and I'm seeing this more and more, that in order for you to get a home, it's like either your boomer or your silent generation parents got to help you out, or, which was the case with me, or it has to be passed down to you, meaning that somebody's got to die and leave the house to you. This is where we are now as a country. That is not a dream. We can't call it the American dream anymore. That's a nightmare. That's what that is. So nobody, and for these kids going to college, and shouldn't just be people to go to college, but no one goes to college and says, I'm going to college because I want to struggle in life. Nobody says that. They're going because they don't want to have to struggle. And so here we are. And for Donald Trump to just look over this and just say, well, it's not done exactly the way I want it. You guys aren't putting that SAVE bill with it. So I'm just going to say no and penalize the working class. And this is the point. Everybody, you got to put all that other bullshit aside for just a second. It's us versus the people at the top. And even if you're watching and you think you're at the top, if you're a billionaire or trillionaire, you're not at the top. If you're not a billionaire or trillionaire, you are not at the top. You down here with the peasants like the rest of us. That's just the reality. So him not signing this, again, continuing to show you who he really cares about. Let's go on a little bit more here.
Michael, can Democrats take the lead on getting credit for this housing bill? How are voters going to see an actual bipartisan action to address affordability?
They can and they must take the lead. The housing market in America is a mess. You've got, for the first time in American history, a quarter of home buyers are cash buyers. What that means is that average people like us can't even afford to buy a home, and you have a small number of rich people who are buying everything. And so I think for Democrats, they have to message this and take credit for this, since the president has decided that he doesn't want to take credit. They have to communicate to people that they are working actively to improve their lives. That's what this election is about. The problem Republicans have is that what are they telling voters they've done for them this November? Donald Trump is not on the ballot. And so Democrats have to take the credit, and they have to message that they are doing something actively to improve people's lives.
So they have to make this a bipartisan thing, right? Because otherwise it wouldn't be corporate media and a political environment. But the reality is this: regardless if you're a Republican Party or Democratic Party or no party, who sits back and says they don't want their own people in their country to thrive? Who sits back and says that? Because when everybody's doing great, that's good for the economy. I want to say that again. No, it's not good that the middle class shrink. That's not good, because that means that it's not that the middle class started to shrink because those people who were middle class moved on to the upper wealthy, class. It means that people are moving further down. It means that people who were once middle class are now a level beneath that. That's what's been happening. The reality is, if you want a thriving economy, everybody needs to be doing well. Everybody needs to have housing. Everybody needs to have health care. People shouldn't have to sit up there and wonder and think, oh, gee, I'm really not feeling too well. I think I may have broken my arm, but I can't afford to go to the doctor. So I'm just going to sit here and take some ibuprofen. It sounds insane, but it happens. Many of you who have worked in the medical field, you know this. You know there are people who avoid going to the doctor because they don't want to be hit with that bill afterwards. Go to the emergency room with no health insurance and let me know how it works out for you when you get the bill in the mail. This is where we're at right now. Yet, I want to remind you, Israelis in Israel don't have this problem. People in Israel have universal health care. They seem to have housing. They're working out, things are working out for them just fine, but not for us right here. So remove these terms, right? Remove this term of socialist this, communist that. Remove those terms from your mind for just a second and just ask yourself this question. Is it better to have everyone thriving, or is it better to have a few thriving and the rest at the bottom? That's what you need to think about. Because for all the talks about socialism and communism, I don't hear those politicians who say that these young people are socialists and it's dangerous. I don't hear those politicians say that Israel has socialist policies. I don't hear those politicians, when we scream about healthcare for everybody, I don't hear those politicians who criticize us screaming at Israelis because they got healthcare for everybody. So that right there lets you know what's really going on, folks. For years, they have been allowing this country to decline, and they don't care, because at the end of the day, they're still fine. When the gas prices increase, Trump is still fine. Trump probably doesn't even drive, probably has a driver. He's a billionaire. These people don't care. Trump, Bill Ackman, Jeff Bezos, the list goes on and on, Bill Gates, they are fine. They got bunkers, whether it's on Hawaii, there's bunkers in Alaska, they got bunkers, they are fine. Do not fool yourself into believing that these people actually care about you. They don't. If someone cared about the working class and they're a billionaire, you call bullshit, because if they cared about the working class, they wouldn't be a billionaire. In order to get there, you got to be taking government subsidies that they apparently don't want you to have. In order to get there, you got to exploit the workers. So no, they don't care about the working class. So push back on that rhetoric that there's a such thing as these good billionaires. There's no such thing. No such thing. But to look over housing for the American people during the time when we are seeing so many people unhoused is insane.
You know, Matthew, Axios reports that Senate Republicans are spending heavily to maintain their lead in the chamber before the midterms. This as Democrats are gaining more confidence in their chances. Will Trump's growing feud with the Senate and the focus on what he wants rather than what the party wants, will that ultimately undermine the party's efforts?
Yeah, I mean, that is the question right now. It seems as if even with extreme gerrymandering efforts, the House will likely go into Democratic hands. And now the Senate, which should no way go Democrat, could. I would argue the pathway has maybe narrowed in places like Maine, and now people are looking at maybe even Michigan becoming a potential pickup. But ultimately, the atmosphere right now is incredibly against not just the president, but the party in power, Republicans. And as you said, affordability, the economy continues to be the number one issue. We have no message on that. And now a muddled, messy international message around a war that cannot either be won or ended. None of this bodes well for the party in power, Republicans. We will see how this shakes out in the midterms.
So yeah, of course, they're going to still keep this partisan. Economy is the number one issue. Economics is the number one issue for Americans, just like it was in 2024. The economy, and people say since the pandemic, I'm going back to the '08 housing crisis. The economy, in my opinion, never got back to what it was prior to the '08 housing crisis. We've been on a downward slide. We had a little bit of uptick, along the way, a couple years, like 2012, we started to have a little bit of uptick, and then up and then down and up and down. And this been this yo-yo ride. Then the pandemic hits and, crash. Obviously, a lot of people were staying at home. A lot of people lost their jobs during that time. And we're now in 2026. We should be heading on an upswing, but we're not. And all of these things can be prevented. The gas prices wouldn't have increased the way that they did if Donald Trump didn't go to war with Iran. We have a defense budget that is continued to increase over the years, but in particular, in the last 6 years, has enormously increased. So we have all this money that is allocated towards defense. And when you look at the difference and you see how much is actually spent towards like housing and healthcare, et cetera, it's very tiny when you compare it to the defense budget. That's where a lot of the money is going, to war. Now, why is that happening? That is happening because the donor class supports and wants that. You have to make this connection. The connection is not about whether or not it's the Democrats doing it or it's the Republicans doing it, because both parties support these wars. The connection is following the money. So if the donor class wants more wars because they see that it's good for the weapons manufacturers, is good for the military industrial complex, that's what those politicians are going to push. There may be a handful along the way that will vote against it, but the majority, as we have seen in Congress, are going to vote for it and going to back it. Israel itself does not exist as a genocidal project without the donor class support. This is something Brian Berlatek talks about this very much, and people have to remember that. No money, no greater Israel project. So even when we look at something like housing, it is us versus the people at the top. They are hoarding enormous amounts of wealth, and they have been giving us crumbs. And this didn't start yesterday. This has been going on a long time. And the way that they keep you not focused on that is by having this red team and this blue team. Trump is a symptom. Trump didn't create the system that we're seeing, but he's a part of it. So you always got to take it back to the top. Now, again, this housing bill, again, it becomes law anyway, because he did not sign it. But it's just really interesting to me that, again, they show you how they are. He made it very clear. Yeah, I don't really care. I decided I'm not going to sign it because I'm not getting this SAVE Act passed, even though he didn't have the votes for it. So you see how they're willing to throw the working people under the bus. There's no mystery into who they really care about. They don't care about us. They care about the donor class, and that's it. That's it. Let's go to some of the comments here, ladies and gents. All right. Thank you for the super chat. The Truth Lady. Oh, I would love to see anybody interview ex-Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney. And I don't know where the and went. Thank you for the super sticker, Max Roy. Shelly said, I'm in Boston. 1 bedroom or studio was out of hand. It's crazy how insane the apartment prices have. Like, I remember paying $1,200 They're charging over $2,000 for studios now. And even $1,200 I thought was high. Thank you, Roger. Sab, didn't I tell you 2 weeks ago, both chambers of Congress passed it by a veto-proof majority that it doesn't need his signature. It becomes law automatically. Yes, you did. Thank you, Texas. APAC posts help wanted ad Sunday morning paper, South Carolina. We're about to get into that. Thank you, John. President Satan. Thank you, Ira. The Achilles heel for the Democrats is anything pro-immigrant, illegal or legal. College unemployment is like 14%. If I was just coming out of college and can't find a job, I would be pissed. Yeah. Thank you for the super sticker, Cold Guns. Thank you, Imrish. Sabby, you're right. I had a minor stroke and went to work limping a week later and prayed that I will not get fired by my employer, but I am not Israel. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that as well. This is the reality for many people in this country. And here's another reality. Let's go ahead and get into this one. Oh boy. Lindsey Graham has died. Lindsey Graham has died. We'll get into the report that came through and also Lindsey Graham's legacy. He was a hateful little man. Hateful little man. The report came through quite early Sunday morning. Let's get into it.
Learning that longtime Republican Senator Lindsey Graham has passed away. His office says he died on Saturday night after what they call a brief and sudden illness. The statement says Graham's family is asking for privacy at this time. He represented the state of South Carolina in the U.S. Congress since 1995. Let's bring in CNN's Alex Michelson, anchor of The Story Is. Alex, you are on the West Coast there. How are you processing this news that has just come in, the shocking death of a senator who had just been in Ukraine and had just met with the Ukrainian president, and now we're learning he has died?
Yeah, I mean, just posted a bunch of statements onto X yesterday in his official capacity. Pictures and images of him working over the last few weeks are out there. So this coming out of nowhere, that Lindsey Graham, one of the most important and influential voices in the United States Senate for many years, somebody who has been one of the biggest champions of more United States military intervention, somebody who has championed the idea of military intervention in Iran for many years, somebody who's championed the United States relationship with Israel very closely for many years. And now all of a sudden, you know, there's been so much conversation about Mitch McConnell's medical reality right now. Nobody would have thought this would come now.
Let's pause here for just a second. I was not expecting to hear that Lindsey Graham died this weekend. I will echo his sentiment with that. I'll get into the Ukraine part in just a second. But yeah, man. He talked about U.S. intervention. Let me make it a little bit more blunt. Lindsey Graham was a warmonger. He didn't see a war that he didn't like. He was also a flip-flopper, which we'll also get into. But when it came to war, he was gung-ho, rah, 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 cheering on every war, didn't care about the death of civilians or their destruction, infrastructure in those countries. He didn't care about any of that. He was a warmonger to the T. And you got people right now like Elizabeth Warren echoing her apologies and how they didn't agree on most things, but he was this nice guy. No, he wasn't a nice guy. There was an episode of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air where this guy died, and I think the character was played by Sherman Hemsley from The Jeffersons, and he was a mean, feisty guy. And at the funeral, this is a funny episode, but at the funeral, one of the guys stand up and he said, "I'm just here to make sure he dead." I don't know what is going to be said at Lindsey Graham's funeral. I don't. But Lindsey Graham we're not going to sit here and pretend as though Lindsey Graham was this nice, great person. He wasn't. And remember, I lived in South Carolina. I'm very familiar with Lindsey Graham. We're just going to call it balls and strikes. He was a hateful little man. That's who he was. That's his legacy.
It's been an extraordinary life of public service, a controversial life. Somebody who was in the United States House of Representatives for many years, been in the Senate for many years as well, became a close ally of John McCain and Joe Lieberman. They called themselves the Three Amigos and viewed themselves as sort of mavericks within the Republican Party. And then he ran for president in 2016 and said very negative things about Donald Trump at the time, but then would become one of President Trump's greatest allies. Just this week, posting on social media that he was the GOAT of all presidents and has been a steering force more recently of President Trump's military intervention in Iran.
Let's stop with I don't like this intervention term. I'm just going to call it war and murder. Okay. So let's get to that report that came through, that dispatch call. So you guys can hear this here. Dave Statter shared this radio traffic from response to Senator Graham's home. Let's go ahead and get into this here.
In response, response, chest pains, South Capitol Street, Southeast. In response, medical response, chest pains, South Capitol Street, Southeast. And let's respond to medical intercept medical response for chest pains, South Capitol Street, Southeast. Check 2027.
Agent 7 communications for a call back.
So what they were saying is there were chest pains that were being reported.
You have open the front door.
I copy, same. I have a call back 2032.
Agent 7-5.
Agent 7, the caller says she's not in the home. She says the door is unlocked. Could you guys let me know?
Dead body is secured.
I copy. Stand by. Communication Agent 7, the caller says, have you tried knocking at the door to see if the patient will answer?
Yes, repeatedly.
Communications Agent 7, the caller states that she's coming from Baltimore to get to your location. Would you like a truck to force entry in MPD?
We'll need MPD. We'll force entry.
Copy. Requested MPD 2035. Come in, Agent 7.
Go ahead and start me the CPR supervisor. CPR in progress now.
I copy. CPR in progress 2033. EMS 6 responders, requested Agent 7 on scene, cardiac arrest, South Capitol Street, Southeast. EMS 6 responders to Agent 7 Medic 7 with cardiac arrest.
So notice another cardiac arrest, right? Because they said Mitch McConnell also had a cardiac arrest.
73-year-old male at South Capitol Street, Southeast. That settles 311-2054. Agent Engine 7, you have EMS 6.
Agent 7 about that.
2054.
Battalion 2 communications.
Come in, Battalion 2.
You can attach me to the run with Engine 7 to Medic 7 on South Capitol Street. There is no need for attack channel.
Okay, so that is the radio traffic from the call that came through that he was experiencing chest pains there. Now, some people are pointing to this, that Lindsey Graham was filmed looking highly energetic and healthy while meeting with Zelensky just hours before his sudden death. Now, Lindsey Graham was just in Ukraine talking to Zelensky. Listen to this.
Yeah, and as you were talking, we were looking at video of him meeting with President Vladimir Zelensky of Ukraine just yesterday, looking energetic, looking like himself. And I think we talked about this. It just makes this all the more shocking that yesterday we see him smiling, giving a thumbs up, and we're talking about his passing right now.
Well,
So let me pause here. Yeah, he's 71. They had said possibly 73 on that dispatch. But some people are pointing to this and they're saying, it was Putin. Putin killed Lindsey Graham. I don't think that's the case. I think Lindsey Graham, there was a history of this in his family. I saw reports about his father apparently having, heart issues at a younger age, apparently. But this kind of thing can happen. But if you want my honest opinion, I don't know. This is one of those things where I might say, look at God. That's what my grandma would say. Look at God. I don't know. Lindsey Graham has said a lot of hateful things over the course of his, senatorship. But at the same time, over the past couple of years, he said enormously hateful things. So I don't know. I kind of might see this a little bit as karma. We'll get into it because I'm gonna go through show you the things that he said over the years. But people are pointing to this and they say he was just with Zelensky. Yeah, but this can happen. You can just be hanging out with someone one day and the next day, you never know. I've seen this kind of stuff happen. So let's continue on
here.
An
old Native American saying that says death comes and it's always out of season. And I think that kind of speaks to this, that, and again, it also shows you sometimes in Washington how we become so fixated on one thing. I mean, nobody could have known what was going to happen with Lindsey Graham, but everybody was questioning about the health of Mitch McConnell. And when we don't have answers there, and people were questioning, just how sick is Mitch McConnell? And then somebody.
Yeah. And we'll get to Mitch McConnell as well. So let's move on to Donald Trump's response about Lindsey Graham's death. Apparently, Trump said he had just previously spoken to Lindsey Graham. Listen to this.
And just to make that point, I mean, authorities were called to his home responding to initial reports of a cardiac arrest. Again, his office saying a brief and sudden illness. Do you have any more details?
I would think it would be that, because when I spoke to him, it could have been, minutes before, based on, based on the fact that I heard about the call, whatever time that was, so it was shortly before. But it had to be something like that because he was, other than being tired, he was fine. And so it had to be something like that would just be a quick end. And maybe that's not the worst way to go.
So Trump said he spoke to him, I guess, before Lindsey Graham died, which would make sense if he was just over there in Kyiv talking to Zelensky. But obviously, he sounds like Trump was surprised by this, too. Nobody expected this to happen. We've been talking, quite a bit about what is going on with Mitch McConnell. And this just kind of went, whoa, surprise. Surprise, ladies and gents. Netanyahu said something about Lindsey Graham as well. Let's go ahead and bring this up. Again, like of all the people, none of these outlets should even have Netanyahu on right now. Fox, MS Now, none of them should even be speaking to this genocidal war criminal. But Lindsey Graham loved Netanyahu. Listen to this.
But let me tell you, the last conversation I had with him, I said, Lindsey, we've come of age. We have a robust economy. We can take care of our own financing our own weapons for the defense of Israel and defense of our common interests with America. So I'm going to phase out the support, the military support for Israel over a period of years and bring it down to zero. We can do it. And he went ballistic. He said, no way, you can't do that, because he was so concerned with our security, which he believed was your security, that he actually fought the Prime Minister of Israel on keeping America's aid or actually increasing it. And that tells you what kind of a person this extraordinary friend was.
Imagine calling Lindsey Graham extraordinary. This extraordinary friend. Nah, he was a hateful little punk. Some might say Lindsey Graham was demon-like. I don't know. But he was a hateful person. The craziest part about this all, I want you to hear what Alex Jones said about Lindsey Graham dying, and then we're going to show you what Cory Booker said. Because this is the crazy part, right? Like, Alex Jones is going to tell you exactly who Lindsey Graham was.
Lindsey Graham, at 71, died of cardiac arrest last night in Washington, D.C. Lindsey Graham was the protege of one of the worst warmongers in modern history, John McCain. Lindsey Graham helped engineer all of the modern wars we've seen in the last 30 years. Lindsey Graham has been at the heart in the last 16 years of overthrowing governments in Ukraine with the State Department and engineering this war that's killed millions of people and that threatens thermonuclear Armageddon. Lindsey Graham, a few days before he died, was in Ukraine during all the different secret factories for the robot drones. And he was an ever-Trumper who consistently tried to undermine America first. The guy was a total globalist and also the equivalent of an Israeli agent. And of course, Israel's leadership is mourning his death. Lindsey Graham,
We're going to drop the beat for that one. Thank you for saying exactly who Lindsey Graham actually was. Drop the beat. Dance with me. Dance with me. Drop the beat. In the street. We don't drop the beat for Alex Jones, but that's exactly who Lindsey Graham was. The reality. Now I want you to hear the difference when you compare it to what Cory Booker, some call him Cory Hooker,
one of the White House negotiators,
what he said here. Everybody remember this, what Cory Booker says right here.
One of the White House negotiators during that first negotiation told me that Lindsey Graham was like an unguided missile. That God, you never knew which way he was going to go, whether he would come back and hit you. But when he was aligned, when he would be in the right place at the right time, man, he could get things done that other people couldn't and bring a lot of light and new possibilities to the efforts. I am stunned at Lindsey Graham's death, but I pray that he is reunited with his friend, John McCain, that they both are experiencing God's love, grace, mercy, and forgiveness. My prayers are with his family and all those who loved and cherished him. I will miss my perhaps most unexpected friend in the Senate and someone with whom I got some good things done.
Ninja, what? This is why we pick a lot on Cory Booker. Cory Booker has more compassion for Lindsey Graham than he does for all those kids that were killed in Gaza. Does everybody see it now? Lindsey Graham was his friend. He called him his friend. So does everybody see this Cory Booker giving this long ass speech on the Senate floor? Does everybody see it now that is just theater? They're all on the same team. They're all a part of the same one big club that we're not a part of. So thank you for revealing that, Cory. He's getting ratioed in the comments, by the way. That's his friend. So anytime you see him go hard at the Republicans and blah, blah, that's just an act. That's not real. He's another one. You guys got to get out the Senate. He's another one that needs to have a serious, serious challenge to get him out. So Cory Booker, Alex Jones had a better interpretation of who Lindsey Graham actually was than Cory Booker, of course. So who was Lindsey Graham? Let's see what Lindsey Graham said about Cuba. Because this is the Lindsey I remember, Cory.
Could have done it. And as to this commander-in-chief, he did something people talked about doing. You just wait for Cuba. Cuba is a communist dictatorship that's killed priests and nuns. They've preyed on their own people. Their days are numbered. We're going to wake up one day, I hope in 26, in our backyard, we're going to have allies in these countries doing business with America, not narco-terrorist dictators killing Americans. This is a big frigging day. And everybody in the world is thinking differently than they were just a few days ago because of what you did.
That's Lindsey Graham on Cuba. Oh, just another country that he wanted the U.S. just to overthrow and bomb. And typical day there for Lindsey Graham. What did Lindsey Graham say about bombs in general? I want you to hear what he said, why he loved Donald Trump. Listen to this.
So I just want to say, I feel good about the Republican Party. I feel good about where we're going as a nation. We're killing all the right people and we're cutting your taxes. Trump is my favorite president. We've run out of bombs. We didn't run out of bombs in World War II.
He said, we're killing all the right people. Does that sound Christian-like to you? Lindsey Graham, who claims to be this devout Christian, does that sound Christian-like to you? Oh, wait, there's more. Eric, let's go to the next part 2 for Tight VNC. So far, we did Cuba, his comment on bombs. Let's get to what he said about nukes. This is the person that people are mourning right now at this point. I just want to show you the asshole he was about nuclear weapons.
We decided to end the war by bombing Hiroshima and Nagasaki with nuclear weapons. That was the right decision. Give Israel the bombs they need to end the war they can't afford to lose and work with them to minimize casualties. Well, can I say this? Why is it okay for America to drop 2 nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki to end their existential threat war? Why was it okay for us to do that? I thought it was okay. To Israel, do whatever you have to do to survive as a Jewish state.
That's Porky Pig just really going off script there, supporting nuclear weapons. He said, Israel, do whatever you have to do. See, this is who Lindsey Graham is, despite what Cory Booker will tell you, despite what Elizabeth Warren's punk ass is tweeting right now on X. I told you guys, she's always the first to fold. She's very weak. I live in Massachusetts. I know. Let's hear what Lindsey Graham said about Iran, about those kids who were killed in the school.
United States, you just wait to see what comes in the next 2 weeks.
The next 2 weeks, meaning what?
We're going to blow the hell out of these people. This regime is in a death row now. It is going to be on its knees. It's going to fall. And when it falls, we're going to have peace like no other time. We're going to have prosperity unlike anyone could ever imagine. Peace brings prosperity. You can't do it by talking. The Democrats criticize this operation. They didn't do a damn thing. These men and women in the military should make us all proud.
And they have.
That was Lindsey Graham's statement after the Manab school was bombed and all those little girls were killed in Iran. That was his response to that. That the U.S. is going to blow the hell out of these people. Again, these are all his words, not mine. This is who Lindsey Graham was. A vicious, hateful, little porky pig of a man. Here's what Lindsey Graham said about Iran's Ayatollah Khamenei.
The Ayatollah's not going to hurt you. He's dead. He should have been dead a long time ago. The Ayatollah's not going to hurt you. He's dead. He should have been dead a long time ago. The Ayatollah's not.
So Lindsey Graham says the Ayatollah should have been dead a long time ago. You see how he was celebrating his death? So now Lindsey Graham thinks it's okay to play God. Again, this is supposed to be a Christian though, right? And makes those statements about the Ayatollah. This is Lindsey Graham. Gen X girl said, may he burn in hell. Level the place. Referring to a city of 2.2 million people. He's talking about Gaza at that time. Lindsey Graham said to level Gaza. So no, Corey, no, he wasn't a nice person. He was a monster. Here's what Lindsey Graham said about the Iraq War. See, we're going back now. I'm telling you, it all comes back.
It possesses and produces chemical and biological weapons.
It is seeking nuclear weapons.
I believe that Saddam Hussein is giving aid and comfort, training and assistance to al-Qaeda murderers, that he has weapons of mass destruction. He is lying when he says he doesn't, and he will never voluntarily disarm. 500 inspectors, 5,000 inspectors are not going to make him disarm. He is a danger to our country and the world. He has killed his own people, and you're not going to disarm him, but diplomacy is going to take force.
Like I said, never met a war that he did not like. And you guys notice you're hearing the same talking points? Killed his own people, trying to build a nuclear weapon, has weapons of mass destruction. Same playbook. They don't even try to create a new script. They're like Hollywood. They just keep recycling old scripts and just putting different actors in those roles. Here's what Lindsey Graham said about Donald Trump when he ran in 2016. This is going to show you what an actor this guy has been. Lindsey Graham was a never Trumper. See, people forget this. When Donald Trump was running in 2016, he was against it. He was against Lindsey Graham, or against Donald Trump. He said Donald Trump does not represent what the Republican Party is. Just flashback here.
I want to talk to the Trump supporters for a minute. I don't know who you are, and I don't know why you like this guy. He's a race-baiting, xenophobic, religious bigot. He doesn't represent my party. He doesn't represent the values that the men and women who wear the uniform are fighting for.
Oh, I thought those were Democrat talking points. Isn't that what isn't that what Fox News tells you? That those are Democrat talking points? But there was Lindsey Graham saying it at that point in time.
He's a kook. I think he's crazy. I think he's unfit for office. And I'm a Republican, and he's not. He's not a conservative Republican. He's an opportunist. He's not fit to be president of the United States. He's disparaged women. He has an 80% disapproval rating among Hispanics. At the end of the day, he would be the most flawed nominee in the history of the Republican Party. He accuses most illegal immigrants of being rapists and drug dealers. He plays into the idea that maybe Obama is a Muslim. 70% of us in South Carolina believe that Donald Trump is not a conservative Republican. We think that he's unfit for office, that he would be a terrible commander-in-chief. He doesn't have the temperament or judgment. I think Donald Trump is a political car wreck, and people slow down and look at the wreck, but they eventually move on.
See, what did I tell you, ladies and gentlemen?
Why you like?
See, sometimes you just got to go back and look at older videos. Yeah, he said xenophobic. Remember, Lindsey Graham was up under the thumb of John McCain. John McCain was actually pretty friendly with Barack Obama. They didn't agree, politically, but John McCain defended Barack Obama a number of times when people were calling him, Muslim and all these types of things. John McCain actually came to Barack Obama's defense. Now, don't get excited. John McCain was still a warmonger. But that's who Lindsey Graham kind of was up under. So looking back at this, when he was making those statements, that makes sense because John McCain says some of those same things. Lindsey Graham was another actor, just another fraud. I never understood it. I lived in South Carolina. I never understood why people continued to vote for this guy. It was so obvious to me. I'm like, you guys didn't see how this guy just flip-flopped between. This is who Lindsey Graham was. Now, they are already talking about replacement. And let me show you this part. This is hilarious.
So for you here, Marianne, this is going to be very important to know. So this is what we know about South Carolina law, about how they filled this seat immediately. The governor can appoint somebody immediately. That's the case in an awful lot of states, that the governor can appoint somebody. You cannot be appointed to the House of Representatives. You can be appointed to the Senate.
So they are already talking about asking the governor to appoint someone in Lindsey Graham's seat, meaning the voters would not get to choose. You hear the corruption that's just happening? And legally they can do it. That's the crazy part.
So they would do that, and then they would have to see whether or not they can get a a special election. It says here, in any event, and I'm going to have to calculate the math here a little bit. It says, if, in any event, if a vacancy shall occur less than 100 days prior to any general election, so that would have been November here, the appointment shall be for the period intervening between the date of such appointment in January, the appointment in January 3rd, which is when the new Congress. So for you.
So yeah, they are already talking about replacing him with someone else. Now I'm going to go ahead and let you guys in on something here. Nancy Mace, who just lost in South Carolina because she didn't get that Trump endorsement this time around for this election, she is already considering running for Lindsey Graham's seat. Now, she may run into the same issue where, of course, Donald Trump does not give her his stamp of approval, which ultimately hurt her just recently. She is one of the people that spoke out against the Epstein files, but don't get excited about her because that woman is still very much pro-Israel and is kind of, out there pointing fingers and calling everybody radical Islam and all that shit. She all over the place, kooky ass. But she's already talking about running for that particular seat. And like I said before, I told you guys, I believe some of these people are agents. I mean, Lindsey Graham said this just 4 months ago. Just a reminder, that's all.
All the anti-Seminites, to all the isolationists, I don't believe. Forget it. I'm not with you. I'm with Israel. I will be with Israel to our dying day. All the anti-Seminites, to all the isolationists, I don't believe. Forget it. I'm not with you. I'm with Israel. I will be with Israel to our dying day.
Well, I guess he was still with Israel to his dying day. I mean, I'm not even trying to be funny. I'm just saying this was a hateful little man. That's who Lindsey Graham was. That's who he was. And that leads me to Mitch McConnell. Make sure you answer that poll question if you can, guys. Because now we got to come full circle back to Mitch. Mitch McConnell, who people still have not heard from. Check this out. Is Mitch McConnell alive? Casey said, breaking, my cardiologist sister lives next door to Mitch McConnell. She confirms that he is dead. He coded at his house. Paramedics never got a pulse back. He's stored in a cooler at a local mortuary. Listen now. Apparently, they made close friends and relatives sign NDAs. If you think I'm lying, you can just show us Mitch McConnell. This is what Casey said has happened. We say we'll add allegedly. We don't know for sure. But I told you they holding on to that seat. Something else that came up. Mitch McConnell was rolled into an ambulance with no urgency, according to eyewitnesses who filmed him lying still under the blanket. A neighbor shared that video with CNN, reportedly depicting McConnell on a stretcher outside of his home on June 14th. He was placed in an ambulance by emergency responders. No urgency. I mean, to me, that means you're probably not alive. You see? So they had that video. I think I have that video. Yeah, here we go. This guy, he said McConnell was dead. Scott Jennings and leader John Thune lied through their teeth. Why the cover up? Here we go.
Not writing it.
Just mute it. I want to see how fast they're moving to see if it looks like, do they look like they're moving fast to you? Didn't look that way to me. Right? Everybody's asking, where is Mitch McConnell? No one has heard from him. And then check this out. Okay. Late senator's home already undergoing remodeling. Like they think we're stupid. Look at this. See the little swatches? These are different types of marble that looks like marble, different types of marble could be for flooring, could be for, something else. But just look at it. People have been keeping an eye on his house. That's what it looks like. It looks like those little swatches that people look at when they're trying to like remodel their home or something like that. Yeah. So do you think Mitch McConnell is on life support? Do you think he's dead? Do you think he's still alive? What do you think is going on there? Now I'm gonna go ahead and tell you something else. Andy Beshear, who is the governor of Kentucky, he put out a statement on X asking for Mitch McConnell's team to issue a response immediately. So if the governor in Kentucky doesn't know if Mitch McConnell was dead or alive, what does that tell you? This all comes back full circle. We're talking about two senators. The Lindsey Graham one's more obvious. That's out in the open. The Mitch McConnell one, this situation is being kept very quiet. Like I said, I think they're trying to hold on to that seat so that Thomas Massie doesn't automatically have an easier time getting into that seat. A representative seat and a Senate seat are two different things. When you're a representative in Congress, that's a 2-year term. You're only going to be there 2 years. They can get somebody in that seat just like that. When you get into a Senate seat, that's 6 years. You're going to be there for a while. So I think that they're holding on to that seat. And I think they have till August or something, until they can, I guess they're going to try to anoint someone for that seat as well. I don't know. But it's obvious to me that they don't want people to know the truth about what's happening with Mitch McConnell. So I say there's no mystery because I honestly don't think Mitch McConnell's alive. A couple days ago, I said he's probably on life support. But at this point, I don't think he's alive anymore. And the fact that they're not doing their due diligence, what they need to do here is insane, absolutely insane. But this is what happens when you have a government that's corrupt. There's nobody keeping the government in check. No checks and balances. People do whatever they want to do. Now, Congress is supposed to be a part of those checks and balances, but if they're all bought off, well, then what do, right? There's no mystery as to who Lindsey Graham was. Some people on social media are like, oh, let's talk about, who he was and, complicated person. No, he wasn't complicated. It's not complicated at all. Lindsey Graham was a hateful little man. Hateful little man. And who wished death among many, including children, who wanted to level Gaza. He became more hateful as the years went by. I noticed this. He was an evil little man. Some might call him a little pig demon. I don't know. That's who Lindsey Graham was. That's who he was. I'm not going to sit up here and be like, oh, well, he did some good things. Nope. He was hateful. A hateful person who wished death among many and wanted to kill many people. That's who Lindsey Graham was. Cory Booker and Elizabeth Warren, who are trying to find nice things to say about him. Like I said, these people seem to have more compassion for Lindsey Graham than they do for the parents that have lost their kids in Gaza. Think about that. Let's go to some of the comments here. Eric, can we go to part 3? Thank you. Thank you so much for the super chat, Ira. Look at what China is doing. They executed many bankers during the 2008 Great Recession. They're about to execute another one now. Get rid of oligarchs. No Elon, no Jamie Dimon. Again, I do not call for violence on this show. Shout out to Seed So Life for becoming a member. Let's give them a big whoop whoop. Shout out to Is Peasy for gifting 5 Sabby memberships. Thank you. Thank you, Red Fire. He sold his soul to Satan, and it was time to pay back. Thank you, Roger. Ding dong, the witch is dead. Witch, old witch, the wicked witch. Ding dong, the witch is dead. Wake up, the sleepyhead. The wicked witch is dead. Number 4 said he's in hell with Dick Cheney. Ouch. Thank you, Sparky. Lindsey Graham was an Army enlisted man before he was an Air Force JAG officer. Blackmail wasn't necessary because he was evil. Being intertwined with the military industrial complex was enough. Yeah, some people are like, oh, they blackmailed Lindsey. No, Lindsey Graham is just an evil person. Thank you, Measured Man. I'll say it. I said it when I turned on the TV. Look at God. Thank you for this one. Forgive me, but I said it. This has been Weekend at Bernie's for a while. Wake up. Those gasoline drawers won't help where he may be going. Thank you, Goba. After a life of war and death profiteering, finally it was deep fried Southern food that did humanity a favor. Damn, Goba. Thank you, Miss Ritchie. Benny Johnson just tweeted a statement and photos from genocidal Mitch McConnell. Unless it's AI, he appears to be alive. Interesting. I have to check that. It's also Benny Johnson, so I had to check that. Thank you for this one, Miss Ritchie. My theory on Graham is he and Zelensky went on massive coke bender in Ukraine and his ticker went out. Thank you, JB. Phasing out military aid while merging with the IDF. Thank you, Barbara. Lindsey Graham's last trip to Ukraine cost $860,000 to U.S. taxpayers. You guys hearing this? Thanks, Miss Ritchie. When I go back to South Carolina, I'm asking them to send their sons and daughters to the Middle East. That's what he said. Thank you, JB. Bye, Felicia. Rest in pieces. Boo. Thank you, Kenmen. Lindsey Graham, see you next Tuesday. Thanks, Barbara. Weapons of mass destruction came from Bibi. So Bibi was behind the USA going to Iraq for 20 years. Shout out to Michael, who's been a member for 7 months. I have the Wizard of Oz music playing in my head. Ding dong, the witch is. And thank you for this one. Did Bibi assure everyone Israel wasn't behind it? And thank you, Marlon, who's been a member for 17 months. Everything Lindsey said about Trump was sad, but true, though. There we go. All right, let's get to the next story, ladies and gents. If you haven't had a chance to do so, do me a solid and smash that like button. All right, we have an update about Nolan Wells, the teenager who went to Horn Island with a group of friends and was found dead. Now, the male friends did return. The young girl that he met on that island named Katie came forward and was cooperating with authorities. Just to give you a quick rundown, the boys said that Nolan decided to stay behind on the island because he wanted to talk to Katie. The boys got in the boat, went home. Katie says that he left with the boys. He did not leave with her, apparently. Obviously, what has been reported is that his body was found on Horn Island. Nolan Wells' family is now speaking out. You need to hear some of these other details that are now being reported. Listen to what they said on Good Morning America, and then I'm going to tell you what happened when they, I guess, confronted his friends about his keys. Listen to this.
They say that he stayed behind voluntarily. Why would he stay behind?
That we cannot answer. I can't fathom why he would. I
don't know why he would. We always taught him to, if you go with a group, you stay with a group. Mm-hmm. Even when he was in college, he would say, Dad, well, we're gonna ride down to a party or something in another city. Now, so I always tell him, look, if you go with 5, you come back with 5. Do not separate from your group. Because I always say safety is in numbers. Mm-hmm. And he always said, yes, sir. So he knew to stay with his group. So why would he split from his group? I don't know.
Unless there was an altercation. This is what I was wondering, like if there was an altercation, but at the same time, this would fit what Katie said. Katie's statement, I guess, was that Nolan left with the guys. The guys said that Nolan stayed behind to talk to Katie. Let's continue on more here.
Would have been unusual for him to split from the group. And you said he would always check in with you. Did he check in with you that day?
So that day, no, I don't. But of course, too, they were on the boat. And usually when he is out there, which it's not uncommon, he's, I think, since last year, he's been going there occasionally with his friends. And so it would always just be like, hey, Mom, I'm back type of thing. But this time they're was no call or text from him. It was from his friend.
And then too,
Did you hear that part? So the call that came through, the text that came through was from his friend. This is something my parents used to have us do back in the day, is like, you know, when we were leaving the house, wherever we got to, where we were supposed to be, we were supposed to call our parents and let them know that we got there safely, and then contact our parents when we were about to head home. This was like a standard in my house when I was growing up. And so, you know, that right there, not hearing from him, she probably had a feeling something, you know, might not be all right.
Really didn't worry a lot about it because, you know, it was his last weekend to have fun,
yeah.
because that Monday he had to report to school, and we was preparing to take him back for camp to prepare for the season. So, you know, we're gonna see. He wanted to have his last little hurrah before he locked down and get ready for the season. Because, like I said, the entire summer he's training. He got more serious. He started to understand what I was trying to tell him about football, not just being fun, but as you get farther in it, it becomes a business. If you want to excel, and you have to understand, and you have to understand both at the same time.
And we know, Ben, that you said that you're going to do an independent investigation.
Yes.
And you say you have Nolan's cell phone and messages were deleted. How could you tell messages were deleted?
Well, his parents got the phone back, and that's something that's important, Michael, because they tracked this phone on Life 360.
So Life 360, but when I received the phone call from Warren, I immediately called my friend Tashima, and I said, hey, have you guys seen Nolan? Because her two sons, Jalen and Javon, like, they grew up together. They played City League sports together. When they got into school, they played sports together. And so she was like, hey, like, okay, the boys were pulling up the location from Snapchat. So the Snapchat location looks completely different than the Life 360 location. So when I pulled up Life 360, it was different. It was showing everywhere the phone had been. Like, I was like, well, it's showing that he's back on land. Like, I'm not. He's like, but no, he didn't come back with us.
Well, how were you able to get the phone?
So we tracked it, and my friend Tashima went and picked it up.
It was.
This part is important, the fact that they tracked the phone. So just hold on to that now. That's important. It's not as if his friends contacted and say, hey, we got Nolan's phone. No, they tracked the phone. Let's continue on.
Like they said, we got his phone, they tracked it. And that highlights all these contradictions, Michael. The fact that they said Nolan was talking to a young woman, and she said that he said, I'm going back to get on the boat with the boys. The boys said that he said he was going to stay with her. And so that's an obvious contradiction. And then this video of this, you can hear an argument going where Nolan is saying, give me my freaking phone. What are you freaking doing? And so then his phone ends up missing. I don't know any teenagers, Michael Strahan, who says, if you believe that story, I'm going to stay behind and I'm going to leave my phone.
That's what I was saying. That, to me, that did not make any sense. So somebody is not telling the truth. Katie says that Nolan told her, this is Ben Crump. He is representing the family. Katie says that Nolan told her that he was going back to leave with his friends. This would be the male friends that were with him in those pictures that you're seeing going around the internet, right? So if he told Katie that he was going to get back on the boat and leave with them, then that means he obviously, again, wasn't staying there to talk to Katie. Katie seemed to be the only one who was willing to come forward and talk to the authorities, because it's very obvious. It seems like Katie has nothing to hide. This is important, guys. Like I said, two things can't be. This is one of those times where two can't be true. It can't be true that he left with them, but he also stayed behind with her. One or the other happened. And then he separated from his phone. Hold on to that. Now let's get into the conversation about the keys. This is what the family said during the press conference today. Now, Al Sharpton is there, and honestly, I wish Al Sharpton wasn't a part of this because it makes it political. And this is not political. The parents are trying to find out what happened to their son. The authorities have ruled that his death is a drowning. That was ruled before there was the autopsy. There are no results as of right now from the autopsy. Only the autopsy can actually determine the cause of death. So why would the authorities just rule cause of death drowning and the autopsy hasn't been done and said nothing else to see here, no sign of foul play? Don't you find that to be weird? And I told you guys before, Mississippi, there is a history, and it still happens today, of Black people disappearing in Mississippi. Because at first, he was missing. But the authorities, they weren't willing to look any further. That's why the parents had to seek for further help. Listen to what happened to Nolan's keys. This is important.
And then we met up where his car was, which was at a separate location. There were issues obtaining the key. But even so, there's just a lot of...
Tell them about what happened with the key.
So I'm going to let my husband tell you about that because he actually went up to the door to get the key because at that point, I was just not in my right mind. This has just been an awful situation. Just terrible.
Elmore Watson, father.
Okay, so the situation with the key. When we got to the house, a few of his friends, they were already there. And they were at the door in the house, asking questions. So when I walked up, they were getting, things were getting kind of intense. So I turned to them and told them, I need you guys to calm down. I don't do this to me right now. I need them to kind of trust me so they can give me something. So I was able to calm them down. So the guy, he's in one of the pictures, he came out of the room, half asleep or whatever, I think Jack's or whatever. And I said, look, I'm Nolan's father. I'm here to get his keys so I can get his car. I said, he's like, his car was in New York. His car's parked in New York. So he was like, I don't know, man. I know it's like.
That's a typo there with that caption. His car was not parked in New York. It was parked in the yard. He said in the yard, just letting you guys know.
I said, well, if Nolan was like your brother, would you please go in your room and see if you can find my son's keys so I can take his car home? He walks off, 2 or 3 minutes, come back. I can't find the keys. I said, okay, so at that point, I get the boys and I move them out the house because I didn't want them to go into the house and start tearing up these people's houses because there'll never be a hole in the situation. So we walk outside by the car. One of the guys that was in the house with us, he was on the phone with a girl, and the girl told him that Nolan's keys were on top of this Jack's guy's Xbox in the house because apparently she was there with him earlier. So he goes back up to the door by himself, and 5 minutes later, the keys come out. So now I feel like you done lied to me. So now I'm really like in distress with you. But
so the girl that the guy was talking to on the phone knew exactly where Nolan's keys were, on top of the Xbox. And this is one of those situations where just listening to how they initially responded, it comes across as if you're trying to cover up something. Well, I don't know, and I don't know this, and I don't know. It comes across that way. And here's what I'm wondering if it happened. They weren't the only people at Horn Island. Somebody somewhere saw something. And I'm wondering if Nolan did get back on that boat and maybe there was some type of altercation, or maybe, who knows? These days you never know. What if he was pushed off the boat? I mean, I find it very weird that these kids are not being questioned. Who were the people that saw him alive last? It seems like Katie, who already came forward, so we can cross her name off the list. And those other 4 boys that were with him, who are not apparently coming forward. Then we find out that one of those boys has a parent who is a judge. and all of them lawyered up real quick. So someone's not telling the truth. And the fact that Katie came forward first and said, let me tell you what I saw happen, that speaks volumes to me. So first they say we didn't have the keys, then you do got the keys. Let's go one more here.
As far as the night goes, if I knew anyone who had a boat, I would have went out that night looking for my son. We tried, but I don't have friends with boats. But if I knew someone with one, I would have went out that night. And it so happened that his coach saw all the stuff on Facebook that next morning and contacted me like 5 in the morning, asked me if we want to go out. And I told him yes. So within an hour, he was at the dock. We met him, and we went out. We docked the boat, got off the boat, walked on the island, walked a pretty nice stretch, came back, got back on the boat, went around the island, looked, came back around, and where we went to, that's where apparently they say that his body floated up. I don't know a lot about water currents or there, but I would think that we would have saw his body. And on the trip there was a family that stayed a night on the island, like actually tented out on the island. So if he was left, he would have saw that family on the island, and it was 2 other boats docked, so he would have had help. So I don't know. I think we stayed there for like an hour and a half. That's when Jackson County and the sheriff department showed up, and they were going to do their rounds. And I had a classmate of mine, him and his 2 boys, they came out and they searched, and then they got back in touch with me and said the Coast Guard had finally showed up in airplanes. So
what is so critical, what Elmore is saying, is they went out on Sunday, and the tide, if it brought his body up, he went missing on July 4th, as they say. His body should have been there on July 5th.
There's that part right there. He went missing on July 4th. His body should have been there on July 5th. I feel so sorry for the parents. This is, man, I tell you.
Why would it not appear to July 6th? And that's one of those things that's just not adding up. And the fact that if he stayed behind on the island, there were boats there. There were people.
Yes.
Somebody had to see something. That's why it's not adding up.
And I will say this. There should be video footage, more of it somewhere, that would show people who were there on that island that day. So everybody didn't leave the same time the boys left. So the people who were still there must have seen something if he stayed behind on that island. And like I said, that's if he actually stayed behind. So something is off. It doesn't make any sense. It wasn't just this group of kids who were on that island. There were other people who were there.
And that's what they're saying. It is just not adding up.
Yes.
And if he was there 2 days, somebody on the island would be able to verify that. 2 days and nobody's come forward and say, no, he was with us, or no, we saw him. It just does not make sense. Make it make sense. Just one last thing. We want her to talk about the cell phone deleted messages.
You're talking off mic.
I'm sorry. I thought my voice was loud enough. One last thing. We want to have Christine.
They talk about the ceremony there. Now, there have been some reports. Some people have been saying there was video footage of him at a pool party. I have not had that confirmed yet. But the fact that we had just talked about the text messages on that phone were deleted. The parents said the text messages were deleted. The first kid not being forthcoming about, Nolan's keys. these two conflicting stories about him leaving with the boys and staying behind with Katie. And apparently nobody else who was on that island seems to have been questioned or know anything. It's very strange. I mean, I have my beliefs, what I think may have happened, but without proof, you know, and that's part of the problem. Then you got one of the kids, you know, got a judge as a mama, and then the kids got lawyered up and all this stuff. But the fact that the police were just willing to look away from this, it's very troubling and it's very sad. And I feel really sad for the parents. But to me, you know, when we talk about mystery, I think something happened to that kid. I don't think he just stayed behind on that island and he just drowned. I think there was conflict. Now, whether that conflict happened with those boys, I don't know. But I think there's conflict. Something ain't right. Something is not adding up. And somebody knows something somewhere. Somebody knows something somewhere. They're just not saying anything. All right, ladies and gents, we have one more story for you. Smash the like button and we'll keep it moving and grooving. Let's get to part one. We are finally diving into what happened to the artist Prince. This is part one, where we are focused on what happened going up to Warner Brothers. Part two will focus on Prince's death. I, for one, loved Prince's music. I told you guys I grew up in a home that played a lot of older music. So I didn't get to grow up with like his 80s music, but my parents still played it. And I loved his songs. Did get to experience some of his songs that he published during the 90s. It was during that time that Prince decided to change his name. And at first, some people thought it was just a publicity stunt. Like, why is Prince changing his names? Like, dude, you're Prince, you know, like you're famous as Prince. We know you as Prince. And later on, you start to realize that a lot of this had to do with the record company. And Prince changing his name was his way of fighting back against the music industry. We talked about Michael Jackson fighting back against Sony. We talked about George Michael fighting back against Sony. Now we talk about Prince fight against Warner Brothers. It was some time ago, 1999, when Prince appeared on Larry King. Everybody remember Larry King's show? Where he talks about the name change. Let's get into that conversation right here.
You would admit yourself an unusual personality.
Depends.
I mean, well, let's say you're different.
As compared to what?
As compared to most people in, let's say, show business, you're an unusual person. Most people don't get famous with one name and then change it, right? Would you say? What's the story of that, by the way?
Well, I had searched deep within my heart and spirit, and I wanted to make a change and move to a new plateau in my life. And one of the ways in which I did that was to change my name. It sort of divorced me from the past and all the hang-ups that go along with it. I was, as it's been well chronicled, in deep dispute with my record label. And
Which is Warner Brothers, right?
Yeah.
Which owns this network, I might add. Just
they do?
Yeah, what?
They,
Pause. I didn't pick up on that the first time I saw this interview. Did you hear what he just said? Warner Brothers also owned the CNN network. And Prince didn't know it at the time. I didn't know it at the time. This goes to show you how far their reach goes.
We had some issues that were basically about ownership of the music and how often I was supposed to record and things like that. We got along otherwise. We just had came to a head in those types of.
So there was no clash over what you would record or what kind of music you were singing, etc.
No,
None of that.
No creative issues whatsoever, and they were gracious enough to allow me a very wide palette to put colors onto.
But about the highest risk one would think someone who gets famous would take is to drop the name that got them famous.
Well, that was one of the things that I dealt with, is that I really searched deep within to find out the answer to whether fame was most important to me or my spiritual well-being, and I chose the latter.
That part right there, I think, is important. That Prince said he decided that his spiritual well-being was more important than the fame. Prince, from what I understand, was a Jehovah's Witness, I think towards the end of his career, his life. I was very fortunate enough to see Prince in concert. I saw Prince in Columbia, South Carolina. I'll never forget it. I paid $75. Myself, my boss, and one of my coworkers, we all went to see Prince. At that point in time, and we'll get into that more in part 2 of this series because that gets closer towards his death, I didn't know if I would ever get a chance to see Prince again. And I was shocked at how cheap the tickets were. I couldn't believe there were tickets to see Prince that were like $70. I'll never forget that. Prince did go into detail about that and how little control even he had then when it came to the ticket prices. But I'll never forget seeing Prince in concert. That was a performance of a lifetime. And there's some concerts that you forget, and then there's some that you don't forget. I'll never forget that one. Now, Prince was a very private person. You notice he didn't really get into his personal life too much. That's something I did notice about him. And so I just want to go into a little bit of the backstory, and then we'll catch back up with Warner Brothers, right? So this is a pretty good article here about Prince, like where he came from. I thought this is really important. Prince wasn't born a genius. He built a cross-instrument training system that made him one. So this is Prince back in his Purple Rain days. We'll talk more about that as well. It says, while everyone knows that Prince was a child prodigy who learned many instruments before his teens were over, there's a story embedded in there that many skip out on. He refused to let anyone teach him anything. Prince insisted that he taught himself piano, for example, and rarely played together with his father. He had some early lessons, but then he stopped and learned everything seemingly by osmosis. He rejected the conventional path to learning music that anyone would take in his place and made a new one for himself. It is also important to know that Prince wrote his first song when he was 7 years old. He was very talented. He learned how to play multiple instruments, hell, before he was even 10 years old. Everybody ain't got it like that. He had it like that. Grand Central, the band that made Prince a one-man musician. In high school, Prince met Andre Anderson. The two became best friends, and they learned how to jam on many instruments together that Prince kept at home. Eventually, they formed a band called Grand Central. Andre Anderson played the bass while Prince handled keyboard and guitar duties. Interestingly, instead of learning the common lesson in music world that sometimes you require other people to function, Prince seems to have learned the exact opposite. He didn't need anyone. Grand Central got booked at high school proms and homecoming dances across Minneapolis. The young people at these parties would naturally want to hear the most popular hits of their time. So Prince began listening to everything from the Jackson 5 to Grand Funk Railroad, Jimi Hendrix, and Sly and the Family Stone. Being who he is, he devoured these tracks instead of just covering them and transformed them into something new. Then he pivots into Warner Brothers. Prince's Warner Brothers audition earned him unprecedented creative control. Prince's early efforts didn't go unnoticed. By 18, he had a demo tape in a meeting with Warner Brothers. The executives were understandably skeptical that a teenager could play everything by himself. So they gave him the chance to prove it in the studio. They were shocked when Prince effortlessly laid down tracks on every instrument. In fact, they were so impressed that they gave him something far more important than the contract he'd already earned: complete creative control. This part is important, which was almost unprecedented for a freshly minted entertainer in an industry where careers are usually closely managed. All this, and he hadn't even released a single record. Let's get to this, the Purple Rain days. Let me explain why this is important. I believe Prince was a musical genius. Prince, they gave him complete creative control. But there was one thing that they did not give him, and that is ownership. Some of my favorite songs from Prince are from the Purple Rain days. Whether it's the song Purple Rain itself, Let's Go Crazy, I Would Die for You, you guys know. Purple Rain was so great. I mean, they even made a movie called Purple Rain starring Prince. That soundtrack hit like no other. If you've never listened to the Purple Rain soundtrack, go listen to it. I want you to pay attention to this part, and I want you to tell me whether or not you believe Prince didn't deserve ownership of his music. These are the Purple Rain days.
But would Prince personally star in someone else's movie based on someone else's script? Instead, he decided to go all in and make his own film, Purple Rain.
And people have to understand, like, again, I applaud everybody who was a teenager during the 80s. I bet you guys had a blast. You guys were probably walking around with the Michael Jackson, like, Thriller jackets, and you could get the Purple Rain costumes, and you can get the Madonna, you know, like headbands and the little cross earrings she used to wear and all that stuff. You guys are probably having the time. This image here is so iconic, to me at least. I oftentimes refer to Prince as the purple one because of this. This hits like no other. When I saw him in concert, there was a guy who was dressed up in this outfit in the crowd. That's how bold, you know, Prince was. He didn't care. Dave Chappelle has a skit where he makes fun of Prince. He said you were wearing women's blouses, but that was the thing about Prince. He didn't care what people thought about him. He didn't care if he wore a ruffled shirt. He was different, and he didn't care about how you felt about him being different. So the Purple Rain days.
Technically, Prince was not the director, but virtually everything in the movie, from the story to the music, came from him.
Would you ever like to direct your own movie?
Yes! Yes! Yes!
The Purple Rain soundtrack became the defining work of Prince's career. It earned him an Academy Award and 2 Grammy Awards.
This oftentimes is not mentioned. Academy Award for Purple Rain and Grammy Awards. And I want to pause here where Prince is holding the guitar. A lot of times when people bring up Prince, they bring up like the sexual, I guess, like, you know, imagery that Prince had. He had these buttless pants at one point, like, you know, the butt was out and all that. People remember those days. But oftentimes I think people forget just how talented he was. Prince could blow on the guitar. He could shred, I should say shred. He could shred on the guitar. Oftentimes I felt like this was forgotten. When he enters his diamond and pearl days, you know, he's like there like playing the piano and stuff like that. And I feel like some people were so focused on the clothing that he wore during some of these performances that they overlooked just how talented he was as a musician. A lot of that changed when he performed for the Super Bowl halftime show and he was playing in the rain. Just Purple Rain, the song, has some of the greatest guitar riffs in history, in my opinion. There's no song like Purple Rain. This is how iconic Prince was at that point in time.
The color purple also became so closely associated with Prince that it almost feels like he invented it himself.
We can't play the song, of course, because of the audio, but you guys know about copyright and stuff. But Purple Rain, like this was the moment. And I still feel like one of the best songs. Songs were longer back then. I don't know what the deal is now. I look on Spotify and I see these songs that are like 2 minutes long. It's kind of weird. But I want to show you some of the things that Prince let go. Prince had a number of other hits. He gave them to other artists, like the Bangles. The song that the Bangles sang called Manic Monday, that was written by Prince. And honestly, if you listen to the song and you don't watch the music video, it sounds like that would be Prince. It has that kind of rhythm to it, right? He gave that song to the Bangles. That song really, I guess, what I understand, helped them soar to the top of the charts. I don't know what happened to the Bangles, but I remember that. There was another one here, if we fast forward, and that is Miss Sinead O'Connor. Nothing Compares to You, which really made Sinead O'Connor a super, super, super star. That was also Prince. Prince gave that song to her. So Prince was very talented, but was also willing to help other talent along the way. Later on, Prince started to get into, again, like I said, his music did transition a little bit here, where he went from the Purple Rain days. He went into When Doves Cry. Like that era is really big for Prince. But then also when he breaks off into the Diamond and Pearls phase, it's a little bit different. Right. And that's when it's Prince and the new, I think it's the New Power Revolution. Right. So he brings in a couple different bandmates and the sound changes a little bit, but you can still tell that it's Prince. Warner Brothers, however, acknowledged that Prince was very talented and gave him creative control, but they were not wanting to give him ownership. And that brings me back to the Larry King interview, where Prince gets into that part of the conversation about what he actually owned.
So you would say, even though we don't like to look back, that dispute turns out now to be an experience that worked for you.
Well, I think my understanding of it is what worked for me. I don't consider it proper that my creations belong to someone else. I can go up to a little kid on the street and say, do you know that I don't own Purple Rain? And they're appalled by that. So
I was shocked by that. So one of my favorite songs of all time, Purple Rain, great guitar riff. Prince didn't even own that song. And this is the warning I think that Prince was trying to give people early on about the music industry. And, this ended up happening to other people as well. Like we said, Michael Jackson, George Michael, a lot of other people ran into the situation where they're like, wait a minute now, I wrote these songs. I'm playing the instruments. I'm the one that's singing, but you're telling me that I don't own it. This is a reality of the music industry. And as the years go by, you start to see more and more people say, no, I want my masters. I want ownership of my music. Michael Jackson, I think, was one of the first. We talked about this before. His issues with Tommy Mottola and everything that you run into with that. Once you ask for ownership, then they feel like it's a bridge too far. And I think every artist has the right to that.
My understanding of it is what pretty much.
Do you still not own Purple Rain?
No, I'll have to re-record it to own a new master copy of that. We've done that with the song 1999. There's a new master recording of it.
I want to ask about that and how you looked ahead. 1999 came out in the early 80s. We'll be right back with the artist formerly known as Prince.
So again, this interview, if you want to see this, this interview is from 1999. It was Larry King and Prince, right? So he said with the song 1999, which also was a big explosive hit, Prince was able to do a re-recording of it in order to get that ownership. The point that I'm making is that you shouldn't, as an artist, you shouldn't even have to do that. A lot of times people don't realize just how much power the record companies have. TLC ran through to this situation. In Vogue ran into this situation. This is how some artists end up getting cheated by the record companies, because you may be signing a contract but not know the business. Now with Prince, that's why I say it was unprecedented, because they gave him complete creative control. That is not the case for most artists, from what I understand. But imagine telling someone like Prince that you can't have ownership over your music that you created. Nobody made music like that. Now we get into a little bit more about Warner Brothers here.
Blockbuster contract with Warner Brothers worth $100 million. At the time, it was one of the largest deals in music history, comparable only to the contract signed by Michael Jackson and Madonna. But the devil was in the details, and major disagreements soon emerged for two key reasons.
I just wanted to pause there and I'll bring it back. I'm sorry, but I know you guys probably wanted to see when he had that written on his face.
Jackson and Madonna. But the devil was in the details.
This at the time was a big deal when Prince wrote the word slave on the side of his face. And we've heard more artists come forward about this, that they were a slave to the music industry, that the record company, they take so much, the artists are doing a lot of work. And put it this way, I'll just jump in for a second and remind you of this. Remember when we found out that TLC was bankrupt, when the music group TLC came forward and they said, people were like, how could you have sold millions of albums and not have any money? One of the things that they explained was just how much the record company gets first before the artist is even paid a dime. They didn't know the business side of the music industry at that point in time. They just knew someone wanted to sign them as a group to a record label, and they were going to record. And sometimes you're so excited at that point, you may not know to look into the details, right? The devil's in the details. When a record company gives an artist an advance, it's an advance, but you got to pay that back. Like it literally is an advance. So if they give you an advance of $500,000 and you take that money and you use it to get a house, car, etc., when you start selling, they're going to get that money back before you see a dime. You also have to pay the lawyers. Record companies have lawyers. They get paid, producers get paid, etc. It just goes on and on. From what I understand, it seems like the artists are paid last. So Prince wanted ownership of his own music, and Warner Brothers didn't want to give it to him. That's why he wrote the word slave on his face. Listen to this.
And major disagreements soon emerged for two key reasons. The first was Prince's incredible productivity. He wrote songs every day and wanted to release 2 or even 3 albums per year. Warner Brothers strongly opposed the idea. The label argued that releasing music too frequently would oversaturate the market, cause albums to compete against each other, and eventually exhaust the audience. Their strategy was to wait 18 to 24 months between releases. The second issue was ownership. The songs didn't belong to Prince. They belonged to the label. He felt that a corporation owned the results of his work and controlled his creativity. As you already know, Prince had always fought for his individuality and independence.
Therefore, have you lost, even as a spiritual person, lost trust in people?
Oh, no. I've lost trust in contracts. I don't believe in contracts.
So he rebelled. He started writing the word slave on his cheek. Then he announced that the artist known as Prince was dead and changed his name to an unpronounceable symbol.
The artist formerly known as Prince. And I still remember this till this day. And I was like, why is Prince a symbol? You know, I was a kid, so I didn't really understand a lot of this. I was like, all I know is Prince is no longer Prince, and he is now a symbol known as the artist formerly known as Prince. I remember that at that time.
Commonly referred to as the love symbol. Prince actually found it amusing that nobody could pronounce his new name.
You see the problem?
For whom? I'm doing real good. Everything's all cool.
To fulfill his contract as quickly as possible and break away from Warner Brothers, the artist deliberately began handing over older songs that had been sitting in the vault for years. He released albums one after another, including Chaos and Disorder, Calm, and The Gold Experience. The artwork for these releases was noticeably darker as well. In 1996, the contract finally expired, and Prince was no longer that slave.
I had to get freed from the mentality of being a slave. You understand?
After gaining his freedom, Prince launched his own label, NPG Records, and from that point forward, worked with major companies only through short-term partnership deals for album releases. It's no surprise that he symbolically titled his first independent album, Emancipation.
And then we have to pause it here, of course, because of the music. But this is what I want you guys to like take from this. You know, Prince was one of those people, again, did not do a lot of interviews, for one. Very private person, but creative genius, and just wanted ownership of his music. The fact that Prince, who sold the way that he did and, you know, performed the way that he did, the fact that they wouldn't allow him to have ownership, that just goes to show you it's not about the talent, and it's really not about how much you sell. They just want to be in control. That's the business. They don't want you to really have that control. Prince went on to give warning to other artists that he had spoken to. And in fact, you can see a clip of that here.
You started talking about the industry in a way that you were the first, I think, to talk about the way artists were treated and to reclaim sort of the art by the artist. Since then, you know, around the late 90s, we saw the establishment of the Artist Coalition, for instance, all this dialogue taking place. Did you feel you were alone back then? And did you feel you had something to do with this dialogue taking place now amongst these artists?
Well, actually, when I would sit down with artists just hanging out, you know, chilling, not doing anything in particular, we would talk about the trials and tribulations of the industry all the time. And we would talk about ways that we could change things if we had our way. Unfortunately, all of us were signed to these really restrictive agreements where you can't get out of them until you deliver X amount of product. And that product would actually belong to the corporation that you're recording for. Now, the reason why it became such a big deal back then is ever since my third album, I wasn't really taking large advances from the recording companies. I was recording the albums myself in my own studio. So the way I looked at it, I owned the work because I paid for it. And I did all the work. I created it, so I felt like it should belong to me. That said, the companies felt otherwise. And they would always hold this contract up and say, well, you signed it. And I say, well, I understand that. It's not like I want to leave. I just want to, you know, talk about this thing and see if we can't make it more fair. Of course, they wouldn't change, because if they changed, they wouldn't really exist. And that's kind of the situation we're in right today. They're not going to exist.
That part right there is important. If they change, then they wouldn't exist. Yeah. I want to say something about what Prince said here about I created it, so I thought I owned it. This is the same for some companies right now, even people that are not in the music industry. When I worked at MIT, there's this form that you have to sign. All employees have to sign this, okay? And it's this technology licensing agreement form. What this form basically says is that if you create a product or something while you are an employee at MIT, the property of that belongs to Massachusetts Institute of Technology. It doesn't matter if you're a faculty member or if you're a staff member. all of us had to sign it. And so it's not just the music industry, it exists in other industries as well. And I think what really woke me up to this, like with the Prince situation, was that just because we create something doesn't mean that we own it. I've watched people lose YouTube channels left and right. And they have created so much content on YouTube. But if they didn't back up that content with an external hard drive, they just don't get it back. It sucks because that's their work and they created it. But according to YouTube and Rumble and all the other streaming platforms, by the way, you don't actually own it because it's on their platform. They own it. So these are the kind of things that wake people up a little bit. Prince was not one to really go public about a lot of things. Like I said, Prince was very private. So the fact that he came forward about this, that raises flags for a lot of people like, oh, this must be serious if Prince is speaking out. I want you to hold on to that, because when we get to part 2 about what happened to Prince, we're going to dive into Prince's death, which many people, I think, still have questions about. There just seems to be this pattern for people who speak out and fight against the music industry, especially when it comes to ownership and these mysterious deaths. So that will be part 2 that we will dive into. All right, ladies and gents, let's get that poll. Let's get the poll. Let's get the poll. Poll. Let's get the poll. All right. Do you believe Mitch McConnell is alive? 27% say Mitch McConnell is on life support. 47% say Mitch is dead. 4% say Mitch is alive. And 23% say I have no idea. 4,105 votes. Thank you, guys. Thank you. All right, ladies and gents, that is it for me today. Eric is going to close out the show. And I just want to tell you guys, again, thanks for rocking with me. We'll be back Tuesday evening, and I'll either do part 2 of Prince Tuesday evening or Thursday evening. But we'll get to the part 2 part about his death. Got lots to say. All right, Eric.
All right. Yeah, I mean, one thing that occurs to me with the whole with Prince is that it's really an extension of corporate America, right? Just the way that the billionaire-owned and controlled corporate class operates. They don't create. It's like bankers, right? In Wall Street. Like, what are they giving to the society? But they leech on and make money off it, and that's with these contracts.
Yeah, it's just crazy. Like I used to watch this show called Behind the Music. It used to come on VH1, and they would have different artists come on and tell the story about how they got to where they are. And I was surprised at how many artists like I saw on Behind the Music that went bankrupt just because like they didn't know the business of the industry and like how the record company takes so much money.
And there'd always be a story about signing some contract when they were young and hungry and not owning their music and not owning anything. You had that one the other day where she ends up owing the record company money after she's made them albums.
Phyllis Hyman. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. She had to pay them. Isn't that crazy?
And, so then the other part of this is, right, what do we do about it? How can this be better? And it gets down to these kind of capitalist versus socialist models. And when you have this capitalist billionaire controlled model, you end up with this kind of system. It's exploitative and it gets a few people at the top richer. They always talked about it. It never seems to really happen very much, but if you could have record companies that are worker owned and controlled and like co-ops, then they obviously wouldn't be doing this to themselves if they owned it. So that's the kind of world we need to get to, right?
Yeah, that's the answer right there. And especially nowadays with all the, streaming like Spotify and iTunes and stuff, I think more of these artists need to be independent,
You would
so
think
you
there
don't
should
get.
be some opportunities there with the technologies, but
Yeah. I think so
we'll
too,
see.
because nowadays you don't have to produce like a cassette tape or a compact disc or anything like that. You could just upload it to like Spotify or something. So I think more artists need to be more independent.
Yeah, I mean, you could probably do a whole deep dive on how the music industry works now with Spotify. Man, I don't even know. It just seems very different.
Spotify is a scammy one too, where I was reading a little bit about this, about the guy who created, how it was created and everything, and then also like how much these artists actually make per download. They make less than they would have when we were buying like CDs.
Yep, you got to be big to make any money there. Oh,
Alrighty.
wow. Always lots to talk about.
Lots.
Oh, what was the theme? Oh, yeah, no mystery. There you go. There's no mystery
no
about what these
mystery.
record companies are.
It's true. All right, guys. Thank you so much for your time. Eric's going to close it out and read the super chats. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.
All right, we're going to let Sabby get on with her Sunday. I'm just going to do a little closeout here and see what we got in super chats. But yeah, like we're, I always like to connect it up to 11 demands and kind of bigger picture stuff. Let me see if I can bring that up here. It's just like if you go to 11 demands, there's always, I think at this point, there's a good number of Substack articles posted and connected to 11 demands. There's a demandomizer wheel you can check out if you want to have one like randomly selected. Another good way in is there's the highlighted articles. And even for one like this, like one that jumps to mind to me, is the idea of the two sets of interests. And with record companies, let's say, you have the interests of the owners and the higher ups and the investors in the record companies, and you have the interests of the artists, and they're not the same. That's maybe the key part of this. The interests are different. In the larger picture, there's two sets of interests. With 11 demands, it's about the interests of the 99% of us versus the interests of the billionaires, and they're not the same. That 0.1%, right? They're interested in increasing their wealth and power endlessly. We have a trillionaire now, and they're looking to do that regardless of the costs that fall on everyone else. They use their resources to corrupt the government, which is really important. That's a huge part of this is how it all operates. It's really important to recognize that, and to corrupt the economic system. Record companies can get into that as an example for those things to work in their favor. The interests of the 99% of all of us are way different. Where we are interested in quaint things like equality, justice for all, sustainability, transparency, peace. So recognizing how those interests are at odds with each other, how the billionaire class is working against us, is a real key to understanding how all this stuff works. I think this could also connect to the earlier story. Well, just in general, like when Dennis Kucinich was on, and the conversation was about Israel. And there's a lot of talk out there about, Israel controlling our government, controlling our Congress. And, when I hear that, I'm kind of, well, sort of, but you have to remember where the real source of that power comes from. Israel is a pet project of the billionaires. There's a few key billionaires that it's part of their whole thing to have an Israel and to have it be what it is. It's hugely connected to the military industrial complex, the defense contractors, the war machines, the war billionaires, all this war and so forth that happens with Israel is a big money maker for that war machine. So it's just really important to recognize those connections, to connect it to the top, because then when you do, and the one other thing I'll point out here is making those connections are really useful tool for that is MCDS. Let me bring that back. Here it is. If we go back up here, MCDS, Money Corruption Demand Solutions. So that's a really good tool for connecting these things up. In something like what's happening in Israel, Palestine, Gaza, it's happening because of the money. Recognize that, follow that, or be confused is the way I like to frame it a lot of times. There's the corruption, though, that billionaire class corrupts the government with their wealth and resources. What's key then after that is we need to have clear demands. We need to be demanding peace. We need to be demanding a government that really works in our interests. When you get into those demands, then you see the solutions. It gets into the money. Our government is corrupted by money. The election system runs on big money. That big money corruption needs to be fixed. If we have a mass movement, if we can get enough people on board with this kind of thinking and demanding an end to the corruption, a government that really recognizes us, we can get somewhere. But the numbers are the key challenge. It's up to all of us. We all have a role to play, and Sabrina and the show is certainly doing all we can. Everyone can do what they can to inform those around them and get the word out about a demands-based movement. And MCDS and 11 Demands is a good version of that right there, 11demands.org. All right. Meanwhile, here on the Sabby Sab Show, we have some super chats built up in the queue. And I think a couple of these chats go back to the previous story. Let's see, is what about Mitch? Thanks for this super chat. Good friend of the show, Skylar the Writer, who says, I think talking about whether or not Mitch McConnell is still with us, says, sad but true, Mitch released a PIC statement today. Yeah, some of these critters are hard to move along, I'll say, just to keep my comments YouTube friendly here. Thanks for the super chat from Maria Rose, who says, thanks for always keeping it real. Sabby, thanks you. I thank you for that. And shout out to Bunky W, who says with a super chat, you're the best, Sabby. Sabby appreciates that. And thanks for this one, super chat from Ira Gordon, who says, you got to be careful in Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia. I had a run-in with some white boys in Mobile, and I didn't have a gun on me. And if I didn't have a gun on me, I figure I would have died that night. All right. Thanks for that one. And thanks for the super chat, Kevin Wayne, who says, the Prince Sign of the Times album was a masterpiece. Mm-hmm. And thanks for the super chat, Dublin Fitzpatrick, who says, thank you, Sabby Sabs. Thank you, Dublin. And shout out to Sparky for the super chat, who says, remember Jungle Love? It was hilarious when Morris Day performed it in Purple Rain, and his assistant held a mirror up to him to emphasize his character's narcissism. Funny, no Prince, no Morris Day. All right. So that's going to do it for us this Sunday. We'll be back at you on our regular next scheduled live stream on Tuesday. We'll see what we got for you then. We'll see what the latest news that has broken. There's always something happening. In the meantime, thanks to everyone for watching. Thanks for listening to me. Thanks for supporting the show. There are links in the all the videos if you want to see how you can support the show. Probably the best way is through Patreon. And Patreon memberships are really a lot what keeps the show going. Appreciate everyone who's a member of Patreon. But until next time, I'll say thanks all and have a good night. Keep up that fight and peace.